Well, good evening, church family. Wonderful to see you again on our Wednesday evening Bible study as we continue through our Gospel according to John Bible study. Before we get going, though, on today's lesson, I want you to continue to pray for the family of our young COVID patient. They're doing quite well, but they are continuing to isolate to keep themselves safe and to keep the rest of us safe as well. Since it's a child that's been diagnosed, we're not sharing the name like this, but continue to pray for them. They're staying safe, keeping us safe as well. So anyway, today we are continuing in our gospel lesson of John, and this week we get to the story of Lazarus, and we're going to take 3 weeks to get through this story. This is an important story in John's gospel, so we're going to begin. This is John chapter 11. Verses 1 through 16 that we're going to begin with. And then we'll deal with the middle portion next week, and then we'll deal with, obviously, the wrap-up on our third week. So, without further delay, John chapter 11, verses 1 through 16. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of his disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." The word of God for the people of God. Amen. Okay. When I was a kid, Lazarus was where I went to buy school clothes from. It was a department store over at Northland Mall there in Columbus. And so when I started reading the Bible, I always thought, which came first? Lazarus from the Bible or Lazarus the department store where I bought school clothes? But John 12 verses 1 through is the start. Stumbling my mouth around. John 11 and 12 is really kind of the wrap-up of Jesus's public ministry, okay? And this is before we get into really the passion story that starts in chapter 13. So it's different from other miracles that we've heard in the Gospel of John, right? Most miracle stories, we get the miracle right off the bat, and then we get kind of the explanation of the miracle. But with this one, we get a lot of dialogue, a lot of Jesus talking with his disciples, talking with the sisters, and then finally at the end of the story, we get the miracle of Jesus or of Lazarus come out. So it's a little different, and so it's worth paying attention to that this story is different than other miracle stories that John talks about. So in John, Lazarus' death and resurrection are the catalyst, in fact, for Jesus' own death. Now, if we go to the synoptic gospels, right, that's Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they're a little different in what they portray as the catalyst for Jesus' death. In the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptics, it's really Jesus' cleansing of the temple, right? He goes in and knocks over the tables of the money changers and says, "Why are you turning my father's house into a marketplace?" And that's really the catalyst for Jesus' death. But in John's Gospel, it's different, that it's this raising of Lazarus that is what precipitates the death. Now, are they different? No. Okay, they're still talking. John is not making this story up. This is part of the tradition of Jesus. We also get the name Lazarus, not just in John, but we get it in the Gospel of Luke. You'll remember the parable. In fact, it's the only parable where Jesus gives one of the characters in the story a name, right? If you remember, Lazarus was a poor beggar outside a rich man's house, and when he died, he went to heaven while the rich man went somewhere else and could look across the chasm and see Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham, if you recall. And so this name Lazarus comes up twice in the Gospels, and this is really where it gets the most recognition. So, where am I here? Okay, so all Gospels have a raising of someone from the dead, not just Lazarus. But if you recall, my favorite rendition of the story is in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, where we get Jairus' daughter, who was 12 years old, and he comes to Jesus and says, "Will you come and raise my daughter?" And Jesus says, "Let's go." And as he's on his way, he once again gets delayed by the woman who touches the hem of his garment, who had the issue of blood, and she is healed. And so Jesus has to kind of stop the train on its way to Jairus' daughter to stop and deal with Jesus' own daughter, if you recall. He turns to her and says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And then he's delayed to get to Jairus' daughter, and she has died, and he brings her back to life as well. So go back and read Mark chapter 5 to kind of hear that story of Jesus bringing someone back to life who has already died. So they all have these stories. They have Jesus delayed, and in this case, Jesus is delayed by his own hand. So John is quiet. John is quick to tell us that this is Mary and Martha. And it's also not just Mary and Martha, but it points forward into the story that this is the same Mary and Martha who Mary anoints Jesus' feet with the costly nard perfume and wipes them with her hair. We'll get to that obviously in a couple of weeks when we get to John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. But it points to that. It's letting us know that these are the same people that Jesus knows about. He loves the family. I think it was interesting that in this story, it says that he loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. We don't name Mary. Mary is obviously very close and very special to the story of Jesus. And we'll have her story here in a little bit. We're not sure I think it's different than Mary Magdalene that we get elsewhere in the Gospels. But we're going to hear more about Mary when we get to chapter 12. So Jesus gets word. Lazarus is sick, okay? The one whom you love. And Jesus will give life, right? Give life back to Lazarus. And this will not lead to the death of Lazarus, but instead it will lead to the death of Jesus. Okay, so perhaps that's why Jesus was slow to go. And for some reason in my head, and I know I'm a pastor, and I know I shouldn't say this about my Lord and Jesus, but I almost picture Jesus in the pub with his disciples, and the word comes, "Hey, Lazarus is sick." And Jesus kind of rubs his head and goes, "Oh boy." here we go. One more round, right? I'm not quite ready to go down the road. I see the human side of Jesus, knowing that Lazarus being sick, Lazarus being dead, Lazarus being raised is going to lead to the crucifixion, right? And so I've always just kind of, let's just let this cup pass from me, right? Maybe that's where I make the connection. Maybe let's just not drink that drink right now. Let's just not go there yet. I'm not quite ready to go to the cross. I see Jesus' own humanity coming out in that story. And so let's just wait. Let's just wait. He's just sleeping anyway. We'll drag our feet until it's important, until I'm really needed. And he goes into this little diatribe of talking about, when is it time to work? Well, there's 12 hours in the day. That's when you get work done. Because when night comes, well, you don't get anything done. That's when it's dark. That's when we go to bed, right? And so he's doing a little bit of a wordplay that I don't have to worry about going back to Judea, right? Because the disciples are like, well, we can't go see Lazarus. That's in Judea. Just last week, they tried to stone you to death. Don't you remember that, Jesus? And Jesus kind of says, I'm not worried about the Jews, not yet. I'm not worried about the Sanhedrin and the chief priests and all that. It's daytime. I got work to do. Let us be about that work, right? So Jesus knows. Jesus knows he's not sleeping. He's dead. And he tells them that. Finally, he says, I can't beat around the bush anymore. Lazarus is dead. It's time to go. And so he kind of pushes himself back from his chair. It's how I don't know why I picture it that way. He gets up and he's like, it's time to go. Let us go. Jesus knows he's dead. Disciples wonder why he would risk death for a sleeping man, right? But no, he's dead. And the story today concludes with Thomas, who's called Didymus, right? Which means the twin. And there was some confusion as did he have a twin brother? Did he kind of have two minds where he was a faithful disciple? He's listed in every list of the disciples. We always hear from Thomas. And he kind of I picture Thomas pushing back from the table as well, and the first to rise up and say, let's go with him. We'll go die with him. Well, who's Thomas talking about? Are we going to go die with Lazarus? Are we going to go die with Jesus because we're going back to Judea? We're not quite sure. And it kind of ties these two stories together. It's Thomas, the twin, because we're tying Jesus and Lazarus together, right? We have the same story where Lazarus dies, goes into the tomb, and is raised again. Where are we going to hear that? By the time we get to the end of the gospel, we will hear Jesus. He will die. He will go to the tomb, and we will have an Easter, unlike an Easter that we've had this year, right? That was not a great Easter, but every Easter, that's that first Easter that makes all the difference in the world. And so that is the end of our lesson for this week. Next week, we will pick up in verse 17. I pray that you will go with me to Bethany, to the tomb of Lazarus, hear what he has to say to the two sisters, Mary and Martha. So God bless you. I will see you all on Sunday. All right. Bye now.